Welcome to Print Month 2025, presented by the IFPDA Foundation. I'm Jenny Gibbs, Executive Director of the IFPDA and the IFPDA Foundation. The IFPDA Foundation is the only U.S. nonprofit dedicated exclusively to supporting drawing and print-focused museum exhibitions, programs, acquisitions, and curatorial internships, and the presenter of the IFPDA Book Award. The foundation is funded by tickets for the IFPDA Print Fair coming up in April 2026 at the Park Avenue Armory in New York. The foundation is also funded by contributions from donors like you and by events like Friday, October 17th with cocktails and a special conversation with artist Anna Benaroya hosted by Christie's. The link to buy tickets is in the Print Month calendar. We'd love to see you there. During Print Month, the IFPDA invites friends from across the scholarly and printmaking communities to share research and insights. We are very grateful to our friends at the Association of Print Scholars for today's program, Pushing the Screen, Brand X Editions, and the Art of Innovation, moderated by Christina Taylor, who will be introduced along with the other presenters by APS President Kibel An. Kibel is a New York-based writer, art historian, and nonprofit director. Trained as a specialist in early modern European art, her writing also explores histories of the art market, art of the French diaspora, and the ongoing influence of old masters on contemporary art. Her bylines have appeared in the Art Newspaper, ArtNet News, The Observer, and Master Drawings, among others. She holds a PhD from Harvard, an MA from Bard Graduate Center, and an MA in Old Master Drawings from the Courtauld Institute. And with that, I'm very happy to turn today's program over to Kibel An.
Thanks so much, Jenny, for that wonderful introduction. We are so thrilled to be partnering with IFPDA for Print Month again. I'm Kibel. I'm the president of Association of Print Scholars, and APS is a nonprofit organization that supports innovative print scholarship through grants, workshops, and public programs, such as this one today. Membership is open to anyone whose research focuses on printmaking across time and space. And you can find out more about us at printscholars.org. So moving on to the main event, we have three wonderful panelists from Brand X here today. Jamie Miller is printer and studio director at Brand X. Jamie received his BFA in painting from UNC Greensboro in 1978. From 1978 to present, he has worked in a variety of printing disciplines in a variety of studios. He has been at Brand X Edition since 2015. Tamsin Doherty is the lead chromist and studio director at Brand X. A Boston native but New York based, Doherty is an artist and printmaker with a foundation in traditional oil painting. Tamsin attended Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and today she works primarily in silkscreen, assisting contemporary artists. And Tamsin remains passionate about the collaborative nature of print and the vitality of a shared multi-artist studio. And to round out the panel, we of course have master printer Bob Blanton, who began a stereo studio in New York in 1974, where he worked with artists such as Robert Rauschenberg and James Rosenquist. Bob started Brand X in 1979, and we're excited to hear all about the studio's histories and technical innovations in the last 4 decades and counting. Finally, this illustrious panel will be moderated by Christina Taylor. Christina is currently the conservator of works of art on paper at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. She's a graduate of Buffalo State College's Art Conservation Program, where she earned her MA and CAS in art conservation. She's held positions at the Harvard Art Museums, MFA Houston, the NGA, and the Art Institute of Chicago. And we're so happy to have Christina kick off the panel today with a 10-minute presentation followed by a panel discussion. And there will be time for Q&A, so please drop your questions below. I'll turn it over to Christina now.
So I'm going to begin today by giving a very brief presentation with an introduction to Brand X, a quick look at the current PMA exhibition of Brand X prints, as well as the accompanying catalog. Then I'm going to bring on Bob and Tamsin and Jamie, and we're going to have a discussion about the innovative projects coming out of Brand X. And then there'll be some time for Q&A from the audience at the end. So we hope that you guys will contribute some questions. Founded by Bob Blanton in 1979 in New York City, Brandex Editions has been a site of collaboration and invention, where artists and printers come together to expand the expressive possibilities of screen printing. Guided by experimentation and technical know-how, the studio has redefined what the medium can achieve, revealing its power not only to reproduce, but also to interpret and transform artistic intent. So right now, I'm going to play a video for a couple minutes, hopefully giving you a sense of one example of how Brandex is flipping the idea of screen printing really on its head, doing something other printers have never done with the medium. For the Brandex 40th anniversary XL portfolio in 2019, both Rashid Johnson and Adam Pendleton worked for the first time with a new resist printing technique developed by Jamie Miller that suited their experimental styles. Here we see Jamie applying a thick mixture of pigment and acrylic medium across the full expanse of the paper, including what you're seeing, the screen printed image. Then they're going to go in and use rags, as you can see, to selectively remove this pigment mixture from the surface in a method really much like ink wiping techniques used in the copper plate etching process. When I first heard about this technique, I was blown away that this is what's happening in a screen printing studio, because it's so unlike anything else that's happening. I'll just let it play for one more minute because it's so fascinating and interesting to watch. You can see how the image is really being excavated from the expanse of ink. And now where the raw paper was exposed to this mixture, it's absorbing that red ink, and the acrylic mixture is being wiped off of the screen printed surface. So it really takes knowledge and experience of the materials themselves. Okay, regrettably, I'm going to continue on. Brandex has worked closely with a wide range of artists to translate personal and collective experience into printed form, often innovating new techniques in the process, as we'll talk more about shortly. Their work reveals the remarkable malleability and responsiveness of screen printing, a medium capable of mimicking paint, capturing photographic detail, or building luminous layers of color and texture. In 2023, Brandex placed its archive, more than 450 screen prints, with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Now on view through November 16th is an exhibition titled Brandex Editions, Innovation in Screen Printing, that presents a selection of those works, tracing over 4 decades of collaborative work between Brandex founder Bob Blanton, his team of printers and chromists, and a constellation of artists. Through the studio's extraordinary expertise, the screen print emerges throughout the exhibition as a luminous record of artistic exploration, giving new form and new life to the work of both emerging and established artists whose visions have been sharpened and transformed through their dialogue with Brandex. The show addresses subjects relating to identity, language, design, landscape, and politics, while exploring artistic process and innovative techniques. Accompanying the exhibition, the PMA has published a catalog, not only illustrating the remarkable Brandex collection, but also with essays connecting Brandex to the history of screen printing and an informative and fun interview with Bob Blanton. I had the great pleasure of co-authoring an essay with my colleague Laurel Garber, where we focused on some of the innovative and collaborative techniques that BrandX has developed. And we featured 3 of their more recent projects with artists Emily Mae Smith, Mickalene Thomas, and Rashid Johnson. And in writing this essay, Laurel and I took several visits to BrandX, met with Bob, Jamie, Tamsin, and the other great team members of the shop to really get a deep understanding of the workings of the studio. Everyone was generous in their openness to share about the process and techniques, and we're grateful for this collaborative partnership. So with that brief introduction, I'm now going to invite Bob, Tamsin, and Jamie to turn on their screens so we can start our our discussion.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Hi, Christina. Thank you.
All right. So I was hoping we could start with a question for Bob. In order to set the stage for this panel, I was wondering if you could kind of describe the role of collaboration and division of labor within the studio. I'm thinking especially of the role of chromist, and what about BrandX makes the chromist role in particular so critical?
Okay, when we're doing prints with an artist, we're collaborating very closely with what they do. There's multiple meetings and interviews going on with them to find out what their art means to them and how they want it to be viewed, the type of mark making they want to do, the type of colors they use, as much of the aesthetic that we can get into through. We try to keep the conversation casual so that we can interpret what the artist is trying to say. They're not all artists are as eloquent with describing their work as they are with the expression of the work itself. So we have to look at the work and listen to what the artist says to come up with the essence of what the artist wants to get. Because it's a business, I generally start the conversation, and then shortly after that, the chromist and the lead printer come into it. And they pretty much take over the conversation because the chromist has to understand, like Tamsin working with Emily Mae and the process that she uses to make her paintings. It really reflects upon the process that the chromist uses in expressing the work and interpreting the work. It's never a copy. Working with Chuck Close, we were working on his prints, and he made a point of saying that he wanted each mark to look like a Chuck Close mark, but he didn't want it to be slavishly copied. He wanted to have the energy of the mark there and the essence of his energy making the mark. And that's what the chromist has to deal with. You can't just copy a mark. You have to bring something to it and interpret the intent that the artist has. And so then the chromist and the printer collaborate. Tamsin has an idea of how she wants to approach the print. Then she'll talk to the printer, Jamie or Roberto on the job, to say, I'm laying down this color to achieve this. And they'll have a discussion about how to mix the color. But the printer, because he's so in tune with the pigments and the type of color, he can actually advise Tamsin on how this color can inform her, which will give her information to make the drawings more accurate to what the artist needs. So there's a collaboration going on there too. But there's always going back to getting what the artist intends to get out of the work.
Yeah, that's really
the
interesting.
Essence of the collaboration.
I'm wondering if we can kick it over to Tamsin and Jamie. It might be interesting, Tamsin, to start with you and maybe defining a little bit what a chromist is. I know a lot of people in this audience, they're big print fans, and I think the role of the printer is a little bit easier to understand. But Brandex, you really have the separation of chromist and printer. So I'm wondering if you could start with that. What is your job? What is a chromist?
I like the way that Jamie phrased it once, which was we take the pain out of printmaking for the artist. The chromist is a role that I had not even learned about before I came to Brandex Editions and saw the studio for the first time. And when I interviewed for this job, I showed Bob an extensive portfolio of life drawing and life painting, and he showed me what was probably like a Helen Frankenthaler done for Lincoln Center maybe 15, 20 years ago. And he said, "Do you think you could do this?" Basically asking, can you look carefully at an artist's work and make hand-drawn stencils of the separate essential colors and reconstruct the print in reconstruct the painting or whatever type of original in a printed format? And I said, yes, of course I can do that. I'll figure it out. So sometimes I describe the job to people in my life as I'm a print architect. I basically redesign images so that they can be successfully interpreted into silkscreen. And there is some stylistic decision making in that, which I think Bob spoke well to about the studio trying to insert ourselves and our observations into the artist's practice so we can see, how would they do this if they really were the one doing this, and what is interesting to them, and what are they looking for in their work, and how can I make something that is authentic to their artistic sensibility and goal, and something that they will like. Because really, we're trying to make prints that these people are excited about and love, and are up to their standards. And that, I think that's my description of a chromist. Yeah.
Great. And I wanted to jump in and just say this collaboration with artists, especially your work with Emily Mae Smith, because Laurel and I worked a lot thinking about that print and talking to you about it, of course. But I have a quote here from Emily Mae Smith, and she says, "Tamsin can see and talk about color like a seasoned painter, which almost never happens. As we were moving forward, I would watch her draw my work, and it was like looking in a mirror or seeing an extension of myself. I've never experienced this kind of collaboration anywhere else." I think that's an incredible testament to what the environment is like at Brandex. I know, Tamsin, you and I have talked also about your experience working with Alex Katz and other artists. So how would you say that the artist-chromist relationship sort of changes over time? And does your working style sort of change depending on what artist you're working with?
Very much so. I would say that the artist really dictates the process. And when I first had the great privilege of making a print with Alex Katz, because it is a privilege to work with an artist like him at this phase in his career. I mean, he has been making work for such a long time that it's truly special just to witness him drawing in his studio, which is principally what I did in the beginning. I would bring drawing tools and prepared Mylars, just blank, and a full-scale C-print, digital print of the image that we were going to do, everything prepared to his studio, and I would stand quietly next to him with my hands folded, sharpening lithocrayons. He was using these oily lithocrayons to draw on textured Mylar, and there was already a kind of shorthand for what the plates were supposed to look like. So when something was meant to be filled in a flat, he would draw the perimeter and put a little X in it. He wasn't wasting time, filling it. That's my job. I'm going to fill that in later and make that completely opaque. He would sometimes even draw these really abbreviated fans of soft color to say, basically, I want this to be a fade out here, a really soft progression. But he wasn't, it's us later who then go in with Stabilo pencils and carefully, make sure that that texture is soft and shootable and going to have integrity for like the actual editioning process. But yes, so that's working with Alex Katz used to be always in his studio with all of the hand drawing materials, observing, note taking, and color chipping the original paintings almost always in his studio in New York. And for Emily Mae Smith, fast forward to 2021 or 2 when we started working on poetry, and Emily already had this dual studio practice where she was living partially upstate and partially in New York, and she was quite busy, and we had our full-scale digital reproduction of the painting. I got to see the painting at Petzl when it was up in her show, which was great. Which is actually how we collaboratively selected that painting. She was such a pleasure to work with. She was so excited to collaborate with the studio. And I also did multiple visits to her studio to see her working process. And I observed that she painted basically with a classic grisaille underpainting to establish the full tonal values of the painting, and then in a very classical fashion glazed over that with thin oil glazes of color. And I thought that could be a really good idea of how to approach this print. So not only will it be maybe more efficient to structure the print that way, but it's also analogous to her artistic process. And that was very exciting to both of us. And we just got along really well. So that was a very kind thing that she said about me. But
I'm wondering also, especially with the Emily Mae Smith, because you talked a little bit about with Alex Katz, you were going in with Mylars and Stabilo pencils and litho crayons, but the process with Emily Mae Smith was a little different, right? How would you say kind of the role of the chromist has changed now with your ability to do color separations digitally? Did that impact your workflow with Emily at all?
Absolutely. It was really useful to be able to draw Emily's separations directly on the computer in Photoshop on top of her artwork, you know, much like we would have done on the light table here on top of a scale reproduction. Frankly, the digital tools for art making have become so beautiful that we're able to create textures that look just like the crayon textures that this studio has been using for 45 years. And we're able to do so with a greater speed and efficiency and reproducibility. So that's probably the biggest difference. Is the stylistic aspiration is still the same. We have the same standards, and the goal is always to keep things within the aesthetic tradition of the studio, but also meet the artist where their interest lies. And the great thing about drawing with digital tools is that if the artist changes the size of the print, we can literally scale the work that's already been done. I mean, for so many years, you change the scale or you add a margin or something, you know, something, and everything has to be redone. I mean, we used to have particularly hot days in August, and all of the separations would stick together because the Koh-i-Noor ink would separate, you know, stuff that had been dry for months. And so, yeah, it has like improved the ease of some things. I would say that we still more often than not end up making combination positives where we're printing something out which is like has the registration already, you know, set because it's in a digital file. We've made the drawing, but then we're hand finishing everything either on top of the proof or on the light table or even on top of the edition if something's being changed or edited. Because the one thing that's kind of lost in the digital space is the scale, the actual scale of the physical print in the world compared to gesture making in your own body as both the maker and the viewer. So I still like to hand finish everything for that reason.
Yeah, and Christina, if I could just add in there what Tamsin mentioned, is that even though we're using a digital approach to it, everything is still hand drawn. The computer is not separating out the colors. And so the energy that Chuck was talking about, and that's so important to Rashid, is still the product of Tamsin drawing the positive and not some photographic process produced by the computer. So it's the human side of it that really keeps the prints alive, and not the digital side.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about CMYK separations. We're talking about 50, 60, 100, 200 colors and separations added in. So that's not something that gets separated out in the computer.
There's also there's much more subtlety to the drawing now. Like the drawing gets finer and finer and finer, to the point that I printed one of Tamsin's separations that I've been trying to draw, and I looked at it and goes, I could never draw this. I could never do this by hand.
Yeah, Bob, it's a good thing to note. I take it for granted, you know, we're not using Photoshop as a vehicle for separation. We're using it as a vehicle for drawing.
Yes.
I think that's I just take it for granted. I've been at the studio for 11 years.
And to that extent, we did make our own tools.
That's true. Yes, we also created our own digital tools using high resolution scans of the Stabilo pencil on Mylar texture that I was taught to use to create soft stencils in silkscreen. Because the studio has been known for a long time of basically attempting successfully very soft and subtle silkscreens that you wouldn't really think could be possible in silkscreen. I believe it's William Bailey, the piece.
Right.
Yeah, in the show at the Philadelphia Museum right now, there's an artwork, a print by William Bailey, which is a still life. Bob has a good anecdote about it. I don't know if you want to tell it.
No, that's okay.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It's basically it's unbelievable that it's a silkscreen, and it's a silkscreen that predates any use of digital drawing tools at all. It's just, I can only imagine how many hours it took to draw those soft plates. It was before my time.
Yes. No.
Yeah, and I was, oh, go ahead.
When we got that job with William, I looked at it and I thought, we can't do this, and or we're going to find out if we can do this. And the chromist on the job was a young man named Istvan Kazbor, and I just turned it over to him, and a month, 2 months later, we have a proof that was beyond my expectations. And he did. It was before the digital process, and all hand drawing on Mylar. So we were able to pull that off. And so it was that showed me what pushed the boundaries of what we could do once again. And so we're still doing it.
So I wonder, because with that print and prints since then, you really have been pushing the boundaries of what Screenprint can do. It takes a lot of creativity and effort and resources on the part of Brand X. And you don't really take the easy route when creating your prints. Mm-hmm. So what about Brand X makes the technical innovation, the additional labor so important when you're thinking about and making your prints?
One of the things I learned at Stereo was that what the artist wants is extremely important, and we were problem solvers as well as printers, and you can come up with solutions that to get from A to B, you can take 12 steps and get there. Well, a good problem solver might be able to say, well, to get from A to B, it only takes 6. But that we're not cutting corners, we're doing the appropriate steps to get there. If it took 12, if that's what the process took, we would do that because the artist requires that. We have run into this many times, that we have to get a job done by an artist. And the motivation behind it is answering the artist's needs, his requirements for his aesthetic to become realized. And sometimes, we worked with Brian Donnelly, and he had, pretty simple prints, you know, the flat colors, one next to another, so it makes the registration extremely difficult that we've had to work with. The edges of the hard edge colors had to be, he wanted to have no evidence of screen print, so we had to come up with ways to do that. And all of these had simple answers to them. It didn't mean that to get rid of the screen effect on the edges, we had to go through 4 or 5 steps. No, we just had to find the right process to do that. Just do it right. You know, there's one thing I really believe in. There are many, many techniques to do something. And every technique is good, but there's only one way to do a print, and that's the right way. And that's what Jamie does, Tamsin does, Roberto, Alex, they want to do it the right way. And that's what Brand X has done for 47 years.
And what I think is interesting is you often work with artists who don't have necessarily a lot of experience with screen printing. So when you're saying, you know, you want to do it the right way, the artist requires 12 layers instead of 6. I think it's less that the artist is saying do 12 layers instead of 6, but how do you work with artists who don't necessarily have the screen printing experience? How do you lead them along the way with the process? Because I know they want to get to a certain place.
Yeah,
it's really your job to get them there, right? With the
right. It's mine, Tamsin's, Jamie's job to get them there. And maybe they've worked at other screen studios and they found out that this is the way we get the job done. And we'll listen to them and we'll nod our head and we'll say, yes, that sounds really good. We'll keep this in mind. And they'll go away, they'll come back in a month and they'll look at it and they'll say, you've done this just right. And every once in a while, they'll ask us, did you do it the way I asked you to? And we'll go, no, we didn't. We did it the way we do it. This is our job, doing the print right. And we don't work with the way other studios do. We've always trained our own chromist. We've always trained our own printers. We get a chromist from another background, they don't last a job or two, and then we move on. And printers too. We have our way of doing it, and that's the way we do it. We're working with an artist, Dan Chard, and he went through an elaborate process of how to mix a color. And I agreed with him and said, okay, I went off, mixed the color, I come back, and this is perfect. Did you mix it the way I asked you to? I go, no, because he is talking about oil paints. We're talking about silkscreen colors. So you do the job right, you get it done right, and you get the effects that the artist wants. And generally, 99% of the time, everybody's happy.
That's great. Jamie, I was hoping I could kick you a question.
Okay.
I've always been interested in your background as not necessarily coming from screen printing, but rather some intaglio and lithography background and others. Can you talk about how having that additional experience and work as a printer has influenced your work as a printer in a screen printing studio?
Well, I started out as a screen printer because Bob gave me my first job. I lasted about 3 years, and then I became a lithographer for about 23. And then I worked in, at the same time I was doing woodblock prints as well as monotypes. So on and so forth. When I came back to screen printing, I had all these different impulses and not really any way of expressing them till we started doing things like with Rashid or with Adam. And Bob presented me with the problem of how to do this rubbing technique. And I had had a little taste of it from doing edging and some prints that we had done, which were basically kind of like Picasso's rinse monotypes, where we put down a matrix and then put down pigment and then remove it. It was a different procedure, same idea. And it took us a while to sort of narrow the parameters down to where we could actually pull that off in the studio here. Some of our first experiments were horrible. But, as we get there, as we refine it, and that's also a really important thing where Tamsin's chroming and my printing sort of mesh, because neither one of us really knew what the end product was going to be. We didn't know how to get there. So it took a bit of back and forth. This is what I'm not getting. This is what, and hers is, this is what I want you to look like.
I think in a way I create a concept and Jamie brings it into the real material world.
And that's when we go, it doesn't work, it works, or this works. Can we go that direction further?
We repeatedly come up against the physical properties of color in the studio. And like Bob was describing, an oil painter telling you how to mix with oil paints versus a silkscreen printmaker mixing, like, for example, enamels. Really, really difficult to make certain colors with opaque enamel inks. And so you have to kind of be creative, both in like an alchemical kind of way, but also in a back and forth with the drawing. If we can't get that purple exactly sweet and cool enough, we're going to have to settle for a redder purple, and we're going to change the drawing of the thing next to it, and then it's going to balance and the space will work correctly. But yeah, I mean, while Jamie was talking, it really made me think about, I'm just creating a proposition that is like an idea in my head. Like, especially before the use of digital tools, you had to really project with your mental faculty how the colors were going to interact. Like, hopefully this transparent blue and this transparent orange is going to make the right brown. And then Jamie prints it and it's, oh God, it's purple, and then you have to revise the stencils and the whole project to align with the material reality. But he has that sensibility encoded. I have it from observing for a number of years what can be mixed with certain colors and what properties kind of go with certain colors. But it's very much present in his approach to everything.
There was another thing too that I was thinking about, Rashid. The use of the computer to map out that print was invaluable, because until we had put together all the what we call commercial tiles,
the large mosaic,
yeah,
the biggest print in the show.
Before we put it together and saw it ourselves, we didn't have a concept of what it was going to look like. But on the computer, we had it mapped out so that it was somewhat predictable.
I spent almost a year deconstructing that mosaic before we ever printed anything.
If we had done that by hand, it would have been all over the place. There would have been so much fix-it to that we avoided through that process.
Yeah, that may be the single biggest change in using assistive drawing on the computer, is the complexity and scale of things that we can attempt, that we're willing to attempt, has been extended. Like, for example, the largest print continuous image that we've ever done here in my time was 234 inches by 120 inches. And it was Adam Pendleton's centerpiece at the MoMA exhibition, Who is Queen? And it was enamel inks printed onto black canvas. And we had to print it in sections, but they were 120-inch columns. And we had to carefully carve a channel through his image, which was basically an extremely high-resolution photograph of a drawing. And something like that would have been just unapproachable with hand-drawing techniques, or even like photographic enlargements and positives. It was only through the sophistication of the computer technology, of being able to workshop how much overlap our seams should or shouldn't have, or should there be a trough or whatever. It'll be, okay, we'll do it with a 1/64th inch gap in between the seams and we'll hand fill them,
The other thing there too was we couldn't see the image till we made the image, because we could not put the entire thing on the table. So it was like printing a scroll.
Yeah, it was scrolled off both sides of the press.
We just have to believe that this end is going to, be true to the other end.
And that it will be the right size in the end.
And a right angle.
Yeah, because particularly those images for him were meant to be stretched over wooden panels at exact dimensions. And in printing on a woven surface like that, of like a woven substrate, things behave unpredictably. They grow, they shrink, the process of print, they stretch. Yeah, so.
What I find really interesting listening to you is thinking about the computer, and it's really a tool to enable you to almost do more hands-on activities. So it's really enabling you to work more with your hands and be with the prints in a more close way. Yes. And I was hoping you guys, since I did in my little intro show the process a little bit of those resist prints you developed for Adam Pendleton and Rashid Johnson, if you could go into that process a little bit of how you two collaborated. I also have a question that I might pull up here, since maybe we could start getting into the Q&A section. So there's a question from somebody in the audience, Shelley Langdale, and she's asking about the Rashid Johnson. They're applying the acrylic mixture directly over already screen printed images on paper. So this process takes place after the screen prints are made as a final step. Is there just one layer of screen print on each sheet, or multiple layers before the acrylic mixture is applied? So maybe you can use Shelley's question as a jumping off point to talk about the screen printing portion and then the acrylic mixture portion.
There's anywhere from 8 to 10 and more layers on those prints. We're using that as a resist, but we're also trying to build up the subtlety of like a painted mark, or in his case, like an oil stick mark. So what Tamsin usually does is, and she has to work in the inverse. If I'm doing the major color, she's doing the peripheral color. So she's almost working negative to my positive. What ends up happening usually is we'll do like, say, 5 or 6 colors that are similar to the color we're putting down. Then we'll put down a major resist, which would be like the canvas color. Then we put 5 or 6 more colors down, which are almost like the first 5 or 6. So we're sort of building up, covering, and backing away from it, from those marks, before I even touch the paper.
Yes, those resists they're interesting because, at least with the red and the blue, they're largely monochromatic prints. Like, they're all reds, they're all blues. The white Rashid has the dark linen, which adds brown, so that one's a little bit different. But you can still think of those prints as being a 12 color silkscreen, or a 14 color silkscreen, or a 16 color silkscreen, and the application of that acrylic water-based like pigment at the end is color number 15. It's the last color in the sequence, and every other color still needs to be printed individually using silkscreen, and we're building up the sealing of the paper before you get to the final step, which is the hand application of the pigment. And like Jamie said, we get a lot for free with that run, so to speak, with that application, because of the immediacy and the texture and the raw kind of materiality that it adds to the print. And it tends to kind of gel everything else together. And when he said I have to work in inverse, I have to work to assemble the highlights, the lowlights, and everything except the main mid-tone and color of the entire print, which has to stay that virgin paper throughout this whole process, so that it can be completely receptive at that final stage.
And the other thing, after we've done all that wiping, all of her carefully drawn colors and all of my carefully mixed colors get a patina of whatever it is that we're putting over it. So there's yet another sort of infusion of
X factor. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's what makes them really special. It's what makes them feel like they could be drawings or something, because literally Jamie's hand is in there. I mean, one of the learning curves for doing this process was the style of the wipe.
Yeah. In a way, you're not drawing, but you're kind of removing in a motion that's similar to the marks. Otherwise, you would be like going cross purposes.
Yeah, there is a really wrong way to do it, we learned.
Yeah, we found those out early.
Yeah,
But that must, when you're doing because you know that another layer is going to be applied over the top, that must factor into your process when you're making the layers and printing the screen printed layers, knowing that this additional layer is going to be on top. I think I recall you guys talking about one of Rashid's prints, maybe Seascape, that maybe it was originally printed with white, but then after you applied the color, you realize really this needs to be like a light blue instead of a white. So there's shifting happening during the process as well.
That's where the artist came in and said, "What is this?" You know, and we're very proud of what we've done, but we've missed the mark because we didn't understand the intent. And that's where the artist is so crucial. It's like we've made all our guesses, we've made all our decisions, and we can be wrong. And it's the artist that comes in and like fine tunes the work, that gives it the right feel. And I think in that case, when he had started doing those kind of drawings, he was doing very clean marks. But as he developed in his studio, he started seeing the subtleties he could get. So what he saw when he came to look at the proof was that we were way back where he was, you know, months ago. I think the other thing, like with Rashid with the big print, is when he walked in and saw us at different stages, he's like, "My God, you're making this the way I make the pieces." And our response was, "That's the only way we know how to go about it." It's like,
yes, I think that was a stage at which all the commercial tiles, the regular kind of angular tiles, had all been printed, and we were still printing all of the special tiles, the handmade ceramics that then were collaged in later on separate sheets. And basically we had this pristine mosaic across 3 sheets of paper with none of the painting or drawing on top of it. And that's the point at which he made that comment, because it's, again, analogous to his process in his own studio of assembling the mosaic architecture and then, you know, going to town on top of it. So it's always a delight to see, to delight the artist. That is like the most rewarding thing that I experience here, is when they are pleased and they either see something about their own work that they wouldn't have seen unless they'd seen it translated into print somehow, you know. It's very gratifying.
And I mean, you've worked now with Rashid Johnson and Bob, maybe you can talk about this a little bit too, but now you've done these resist printing techniques, you've done the big mosaic prints. Is he coming back and saying, "I need to do more prints, this is like really exciting to me," how these prints are being made that have never been kind of made before? How do you kind of work with an artist to keep his kind of creativity sparked in that way?
You keep them happy. You keep giving them things like Tamsin was saying. He looked at us doing that large mosaic in exactly the same process that he's done. Emily Mae looked at it the same way. This is exactly the same way I do my paintings. So we try to be true to what the artist wants and give them something that they're really proud of. When I can remember taking him the blue Anxious Man, the bruised print, to his studio, and when we laid it out on the table for him, he just said, "Wow, this could be my drawing." And that's how you keep an artist happy, you know, and that's how you keep them coming back to do stuff. That's been the secret with Adam Pendleton. We've been working with Adam, oh Lord, I don't know, 20, 25 years. And we'll work for 10 years, and then he'll be gone for 2 or 3. Then he'll come back because he likes what we do, and then we'll work for another 4 or 5 years, and then he'll disappear for a while and come back. And right now we're in the midst of an extremely exciting group of prints that we're doing with him. And this is because we can be true to what the artist wants. And you know, the idea is it's, you know, it's a business. This is a real world. We have to make money to pay the rent, to pay the printers, to keep things going. But we've always kept it to the point where we don't worry about the budget. You know, it's I try to be as accurate working with the publisher. I try to be as accurate as I can with what it's going to cost. But if an artist comes in and the project turns out to be more than what I expect it to be, we go with it, because it's about satisfying the art, satisfying the aesthetic. And I think that's what we've been true to. And that's what has managed to keep us in business all this time. All the artists seem to be happy because we're true to what they want. And that's something I learned at Stereo. You know, you make the artist happy. There was a Malcolm Morley etching that was done there that ended up being very offensive. What he added at the end being very offensive to the publisher, the people who are paying for the print. And they tried to stop the print. Well, the owners of the studio said, no, this is what the artist wants. This is what we're going to do. And
keep the artist happy.
Keep the artist happy. And it's wonderful to keep the publisher happy. And 99% of the time you keep the artist happy, you keep the publisher happy. But there's those places where there's a conflict and it just doesn't work out. But you keep the artist happy. Yeah. And that's when they come back.
Thank you. And we have only a couple more minutes, so I want to make sure we get to some answers in the Q&A from the audience. So we have one question from Betty. So I'm going to read out her question. She says, hi, thanks for this. I'm curious about the use of non-traditional or natural pigments in screen printing. For example, Ed Ruscha's Chocolate Room was printed using actual chocolate. Was that technically screen printing? And if so, could one experiment similarly with natural coloring agents like paprika or saffron? How might you handle issues like binders or textures? Could materials like sand be incorporated, or would they damage the screen? That's the question. And I wonder if the question part about sand sort of reminded me of the Mickalene Thomas glitter prints. So maybe you can incorporate that a little bit into the answer.
Well, the glitter was applied to wet ink, so it didn't pass through the screen. But we do have a couple of screens here that are kind of like window screens. They're very open.
40 mesh.
Yeah, so it's and quite often we use them for drawing paper on. But you can get a lot of material through those. You can put.
Are you using other materials other than you know, commercial screen printing inks,
well, like if someone was talking about printing paprika, it would go into our base. You know, we would use our screen printing base to
This is phosphorescent pigment. We've been adding different stuff to silkscreen mediums for the entire time that I've been at this studio.
Even oil paint.
Yes, we'll use oil paint mixed into the ink to get the correct color. Maybe a tube given us from a painter. But I really love when Jamie uses silver, graphite, and charcoal dust mixed in with the medium. That produces some really beautiful surfaces, really beautiful qualities, and subtle differences that maybe are not exactly a hue or even a value difference, but just an optical,
like a material difference.
Material difference, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now one of the things about using natural pigments and the chocolate that Ruscha used is the archival properties of them. You know, like a paprika might be, well, it'll probably be more receptive to fading in light and being fugitive. So if you use natural pigments, you have to weigh that. Using fluorescent pigments that we'll use. An artist wants to use fluorescent pigments, we tell them, if these are hung in anywhere near sunlight, the color is going to fade. So you don't necessarily want to do that. If they want to go ahead and do that, we do that. But I think that's the biggest thing about using natural pigments, is the archival quality, whether the pigment that you're using will discolor the paper. Right? If there's too much oil in there were varnishes that we were using back in the 70s that, given enough time, the back of the sheet turned yellow because the oils leached through. So this is those type of questions that you have.
Well, as a conservator, I have to say I appreciate those considerations.
Try as hard, I was gonna say, we try as hard as we can to be archivally correct with our
Yeah.
adhesives, with our pigments. And, you know, we sort of proved to ourselves that we're behaving appropriately before we go ahead and pull it into an edition.
But
Go ahead.
what also gets said, you know, occasionally is that what is truly archival, right? I mean, what is truly 100% archival? Like the Colosseum, you know, and not completely, nothing really, nothing is complete. So if you're thinking about time and the duration of an artwork, of the lifespan of an artwork, that's what you're really thinking about, I think. I mean, thinking about natural pigments, they're just more likely to change over time, but everything ages and changes over time.
Yeah, and sometimes artists like the quicker change of
maybe it's part of the conceptual idea
exactly.
of
Yeah.
So I saw a really beautiful project when I was in school where someone was printing watercolors through silk screens onto a soaked sheet, and they were using photographic stencils, and it had this beautiful dispersive, you know, quality. And yeah, I love the idea of using different types of pigments in silk screen. I think it's great.
This might lead to, I think we have time for one more question. There's one in the chat from Susan, and she's wondering, do any of the artists you work with ever do direct painting or drawing on the screen?
Yes.
Only, you're talking about tuition glue? Like that doesn't really exist in a specific way. Artists have made corrections to the screen using the materials that we use now, but tuition glue screens are practically non-existent.
Or I don't know if it's if the question is kind of like a monotype type.
Yes.
Oh, that's different. That's different.
Yeah, we have people paint directly on a screen, and then we print, and it spreads it out and does things. We've done that. We did that with Glenn Ligon using etching ink, of all things, painting directly on a screen and then printing it. And Jamie, you have probably instances of that.
Yeah, well, you're talking about printing directly or drawing directly on a screen. There's screen monotypes, which is basically using the medium we print with to melt the drawing material again, so that the artist can work directly on the screen without a matrix and do like one of a kinds.
Great. Well, I mean, honestly, talk to you guys all day, but I think I'm going to invite Jenny back on to close out the program. But I wanted to thank you all so much for talking with me today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Christina.
That was really, really great. Thank you, Tamsin, Jamie, Christina, Bob, and thank you all for your excellent questions. Tomorrow evening, we are hosting a reception and exhibition viewing at Print Center, New York for Data Consciousness, Reframing Blackness in Contemporary Print. It's a free event. We'd love to see you there. And if you'd like to RSVP, you will find the link in the Print Month calendar. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.